When will your adventure begin? Join the Federation and become part of a mission to traverse to the skies, bringing the unity of our work to places in need all over the world. The Federation has long been revered as an agent of protection for truth and for the betterment of humankind. That's why right now you can help the Federation more than ever before. With your donations, you can help our humanitarian missions and you can help our disaster response units. In a world where political discourse has left a void in our world's ability to help hurricane and other natural disaster victims, it's the role of the Federation to stand tall and make a difference. Shop the Federation Promenade and make your donation at trekfederation.com today.
On this episode from the Trek Files and Trekland Tuesdays, Larry Nemecek.
Space. The podcast frontier. Our mission, explore the Trek universe.
Orbiting overhead, Earth Station 1. Vessel on approach. Cleared for docking.
This is Talkin Bout Trek.
Welcome aboard for another episode of Talkin Bout Trek, the podcast frontier. I'm your host, Rob Edwards from the command deck. Each episode we'll explore aspects of the Trek universe, subscribe to our YouTube transmissions to stay up to date, and follow us on our social media channels. Today's guest is a writer, actor, script consultant, speaker, and the host of the Trek Files and Trekland podcast. He also serves as on the board of directors of the Will Rogers Ranch Foundation that supports the Will Rogers State Historic Parks in Greater Los Angeles. Let's welcome aboard Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek. Hello, Larry.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being with us. You know, I just wanted to start by saying we cannot believe the apocalyptic devastation we're seeing in California, and looks like this has destroyed pretty much the Will Rogers State Historic Park out there as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, one thing when you see the newsreels over, I don't want to, on one hand, it's apocalyptic and destructive. We're talking about some small areas, but it's areas the size of, Manhattan and San Francisco and all that. So it's not like the whole state's gone. But certain areas that were it was just a perfect storm of situations. And the first night thank you for that. We did lose our historic Will Rogers Ranch House and stables. We were just about to mark the centennial of all that.
Oh my gosh.
Crazy.
Man.
We just had the 80th anniversary of it as a park because it was his home for 15 years before he died, and then the family later gave it to the state. But yeah, we're reeling from that because it was just such a thing. But so many people have lost everything they had too, and businesses and churches and schools and all that. So it was just terrific. But it went the first night when it was literally like a fire hurricane. I mean,
right.
The winds
That's
were
what we're seeing, yeah.
They couldn't get the water trucks and the helicopters and planes. The air dumpers couldn't get up, and the whole thing was just so overwhelming to everybody in the area. And this was on the east side,
right.
And thankfully it kind of stabilized after that, and where it grew after that was up into the ridge and the hills. But yeah, that first day was just horrendous for that part of town. And then the one over by Pasadena, the Eaton Fire, Altadena, threatened JPL. NASA's JPL.
Yeah.
And my friend that has contract work with them said 150 of their employees lost homes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I was talking to some folks.
On top of all the communities, and everybody can point to that. It's relatively small areas, but then I say that as an Angelino now. But it's the size of city limits of other major cities is what was lost.
Yeah. I was talking to some other folks out there that I know, and they said they've never seen the winds up to this type of magnitude. It's just been crazy.
And as somebody said, the winds didn't cause the fire, the dry temperatures didn't cause the fire, the scale didn't cause the fire. It took one spark, and that was it. But no, I'm an Okie. I'm originally Oklahoman, and I remember the May 3rd, 99 tornado that was so amazingly, it was like a whole new paradigm. They had to add another level to the EF scale for it. And we know what happens with the hurricanes and the floods, and things are happening that we've not seen in man's memory, much less keeping records. And
just crazy. Our prayers definitely out to everyone affected by this disaster out there. Is there anything that's getting set up, any contribution thing for Will Rogers or anything like that?
Yes, thank you. Right off the bat, long-term, State Parks obviously owns the property. Our foundation works hand in glove with them, including Will's great-granddaughter, Jennifer Rogers. There's always been a family element here, as there are with the memorials in Oklahoma. And before we get to long-term hardcore, we're just dealing with the people in our community. We have volunteers, we have park staff, we had a board member, a founding board member, our chief interpreter at the park. Anyway, all lost their homes, and we have a fund. If people go to willrogersranchfoundation.org or even just willrogers.com, our sister site in Oklahoma is helping us support this too. And we're doing a fund just for everybody who's supported the park. We're trying to support them over the years. So our staff, volunteers, and people in our community. Also, the woman who had the horse vendor where you could rent a horse, and she also had her riding academy there, but you could rent a horse and ride around the park like Will did. She had 10 horses, all were saved, but the stables were her business basically, aside from being historic, and some of the outbuildings. And she has a GoFundMe. I can send you the link for that too, but it's Jigsaw Farms on GoFundMe. And she had 4 employees, and then her own house on top of that was burned out. So
oh my gosh, just so much devastation and craziness. Yeah. Let's hope this comes to an end and people can start getting back to a little bit of normalcy and get some of this stuff rebuilt, and just crazy.
Yeah, I'm ready for a little Star Trek, transporter, beam out the oxygen, extinguish the fire in a force field technology, and
right.
Further modification. I'm ready for some of those. I used to be ready for just the transporter, but I've lengthened my list.
We need the weather modification satellites. That's what we need. Yeah. But yeah, let's transport into the Trek universe and let's talk a little bit about that. That's what we wanted to bring up with you. So you're the author of the best-selling Next Generation companion book for pocketbooks. You created the Star Trek stellar cartography map that now the franchise producers still use to this day. And not only that, you also have a co-credit for Star Trek Voyager episode Prophecy, which is amazing to me.
Yeah, I want to do an asterisk there. I mean, stellar cartography as a title is my baby, but I didn't create the maps. I'm kind of standing on Mike Okuda's shoulders that came up with the quadrant system. Finally, we've gone through 2 unofficial but quasi-official versions as people tried to work out the star layout for Star Trek and overlap it with real astronomy, starting with Franz Josef Schnabel back in the original tech manual. He had 2 or 3 pages trying to do that, but the scale was too big, and a few years later, out of New York, a guy that did some of the early blueprints for the bridge and the Romulan ship and the Klingon ship, Mike McMaster, had a contract with Bantam to do a Star Trek maps, and he was killed midway through, and one of his cohorts, a guy named Jeff Mandel, finished it off, and it was the last thing before Pocket had the license with the motion picture. And then all these years later, and a lot of the games use that. Star Trek Battles.
I was going to say Star Trek Online has the map.
And actually, you know what? Starfleet Battles, Starfleet Battles used the Franz Josef original layout, and then FASA in the 80s used the Star Trek because there wasn't anything else. And then with the coming of Next Gen, and Uber fan, thank you for being there, Mike Okuda. 3rd season, The Price, when the Barzan wormhole was supposed to go somewhere, across the galaxy, they needed a shorthand for that. And Mike came up with the rough idea of the 4 quadrants and named, the Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, and that we were in the Alpha, actually the border of Alpha, Beta, and that they were running into the, I want to say the Delta quadrant in that episode. Anyway, and the Ferengis, yes, and the Ferengis.
Yeah, that's because they found them later on.
And then Voyager.
Oh, we're losing you a little bit there. You're I don't know if we lost the communications link there. Hello, are you still there, Larry? I think you're cutting out a little bit.
Picked it up, yeah, later on. So Mike laid out that rough outline and where the Romulans, Klingons, are Cardassians. The movies was working on the tail end of Voyager, and then he got to do some of the maps and stellar cartography, and then the first season of Enterprise with all the close-in stars, and he got to put his proof, and then did the book, Star Trek Star Charts, I think, and
okay.
I worked on that with him because I had worked on him. Anyway, it's been this odd thing of every 20 years I get pulled back into star charting from being a kid in college with Jeff, and then again on his book, and then they came to me and said, do you want to do the big poster fold-out maps for stellar cartography? So I just want to caveat there that, and then I wrote the book that kind of, I think I got to retcon and fill a lot of gaps. And the thing I'm proudest of maybe is that I choreographed the Dominion War and made it make sense. So I'll take that.
Excellent. So much stuff going on. So the only thing you didn't touch on there is the co-credit for your Star Trek Voyager episode, Prophecy, which was a great episode, a great idea. I think you had mentioned sometime that you had talked about, you had pitched this to Jerry Taylor a little bit, and they were kind of interested in it, right?
The story was that I had been interviewing everybody for the companion, and then so many of the people, the writers and a lot of backstage people, stayed after the first edition was out. I kept that up, and I have this huge archive record that's never been, I've used it for articles, but it's never been published en masse the way, say, Mark Altman and Ed Gross did theirs. But I have it, and I'm trying to get it digitized. But because of that and the familiarity, and then my wife Janet, after we moved to LA, invited into Temp when they needed an assistant script coordinator, and then it became permanent with Voyager. So we kind of had an open door in the very beginning to come in and pitch, and we weren't. She was wanting to become a writer then, and I was next door to it, and I'd heard everybody's pitching stories, and I knew how stressful it was. But we worked on ideas, came up with all these elaborate ideas early. I mean, before the pilot had. We're as we record this, it's 30th anniversary day.
Exactly. Yep.
And so in the December, and I marked this in my socials. In December, before the pilot aired, and they had filmed they'd done the pilot and 5 or 6 shows, and the characters had started to evolve. We pitched 5 or 6 stories, and of course, the one that we threw in, because I said, okay, we worked really hard on 3 or 4 ideas. I kept seeing this wagon train kind of thing of they get into it, which is an idea they kind of used 6th, 7th season. But of all of those 4 or 5 ideas, I said, you know what? One of the characters is half Klingon. Let's just say they meet some Klingons in the Delta Quadrant, because it was part of the Klingon outreach but they're 100 years old. They're from Kirk's time, and it's a generational Klingon ship. And we just threw that in the pile. And of course, that's the one that Jerry liked when Janet and I were pitching. And we were like, oh, well, okay, fine. And they bought, and then Michael said, okay, they bought it. And then we had a story conference on it. And the thing was, they had just split B'Elanna in 2, human and Klingon, and they said, let's save this for 2nd season. Okay. Well, then 2nd season, they said, well, we've had Ferengis, we've had a Romulan site. It's like, it's feeling too cozy with the Alpha Quadrant, let's put it down another year. And then another year was, well, they just brought the Klingons to DS9 with Worf. It's going to look like we're just copying. Anyway,
didn't want to overdo it, yeah.
But the core of the story, it was always a B'Elanna story. And it was about meeting Klingons in the Delta Quadrant, unexpectedly, obviously, and Klingons who are out of date, and B'Elanna is the focal point. And at one point, she has to choose, and she falls in love with their engineer, and she has to choose between her crew there and the Klingons, and she's pissed about, she didn't want to do the assignment first, and then she's pissed that she fell for the guy. So, but we were dealing with baby characters who had barely started to form, and she didn't have her and then she didn't have her attachment to Tom at that point, so...
Well, you had to try to change it a little bit.
Yeah. After 4 seasons of evolution, I looked at Jen, I said, they're never going to use this now. The show has grown beyond what we pitched. And Lo and behold, when Brannon stepped away to go develop Enterprise, and Ken Biller was showrunner the last season, he had been in the writer's room when we did the first story editing, the first story session with Jerry and Michael, and the staff was so little that Brannon was working on a script, and it was just Ken Biller and Jerry and Michael in the room with Janet and me. But he remembered that and said, Larry, do you still have your notes from that pitch you guys sold the first season? And I was like, yes, because they couldn't find them. So
Of course I have them right here. I'll be right back.
Don't get excited. Well, I had to go home and I told Janet, don't get excited. They may resurrect our story after all. So they had to update it. Everything about it being her pregnant baby. I mean, her
Right. So did they have that word Kuvama, or did someone have to come up with that?
If you notice, there's now 6 names on the script credit, which was very nice of them to keep us on it. I mean, we got paid for the story. It was very nice that now I get, $10 every 3 months for that episode because they kept us in the credits. They didn't have to do that. But everything about it being a prophecy and all of that was the core thing of finding Klingons and having them not trust us and not believing at first that there'd been a détente for 100 years, the Khitomer Accords.
Right.
All of that was part of the setup, but all the detail about the baby and the prophecy was what was created. So we're very glad, that grateful that they kept us in the credits. That was nice of Ken to do that.
Yeah, I thought it was a really great episode, a great idea for that for sure. And you've not only written, so you've acted in some Star Trek incarnations. So you're Dr. McCoy. You're a creative consultant for Star Trek Continues. You're on Star Trek New Voyages. I think you played an Asturian captain on there. And you've also done the comments for Star Trek The Undiscovered Country, for the Star Trek The Original Series motion picture Blu-ray set. And not only that, you're also an unnamed human in the ceremony for the 2005 Star Trek Enterprise episode, These Are the Voyages.
Yeah, my retcon is that he was this was still, early days, and he was with a contracting firm that did a lot of business with Starfleet, and that's why he was there among all the Starfleet people. What I wanted to do was be a Tellarite, and they had just done the Coalition of Planet. They had just set that up and planned out everything, and I just missed being a Tellarite in the Terra Prime 2-parter.
Yeah.
So they were like, well, we've got this scene with extras. We're going to have some guest extras the same way that Vic's Lounge had all the guest extras for the last episode of DS9.
Right.
And I said, okay, fine. And then it was a big deal. And then, it was very, and it was the last day. So it was very emotional, just the way that I could have been in the Vic's Lounge scene. And I didn't think about it. And Ira yelled at me and said, why didn't you jump in and get in the scene? We had plenty of room. And I'm like, I was there all day anyway, covering and talking to people.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
That was a thrill. And the films have been fun too.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting episode, but I think it was kind of backhanded. I think a lot of the main actors really weren't too happy about that because it was almost like it turned into a next gen episode. You know what I mean? So it kind of really wasn't fair to the folks on Enterprise. Really,
it's been in their craw and in fandom's craw ever since, and people have between the Pocket Pro books and everybody has just retconned that Trip was really assassinated that day, and that it was all a Section 31 beam out whatever.
right.
If we ever got to have any kind of pickup or have Trip pop up as a hologram or time travel in the future, I think we could if we could bring Kirk back from the Nexus, then
right. Nobody dies or is gone forever in Star Trek. That's just not how it works in this universe.
right. No one ever really dies in science fiction.
No.
Leonard Nimoy, yeah.
Definitely. So tell us a little about your podcast. You have the Trek Files and Trekland. How long this been going on? You've been doing these for a long time.
Well, see, I used to be editor of the Communicator magazine, which was official. I used to consult on I did all kinds of work for the old Star Trek The Experience. I mean, in the 90s and the aughts, when things were just booming, I had more that I could keep up with. I worked on the fact files overseas, all kinds of things. And then everything, shut down in 2005. And it was a perfect storm. And I was like, well, what do I do with this Rolodex of names and information and archives and all of that? And there was nothing much, and the world had gone digital on top of everything with Paramount and Star Trek.
Right.
And the JJ movies came about a year later, the contract, but it was still one-off movies, and it was outsiders that had no connection. So it was a rough time, and I was like, well, do I just give up on all this and go away? And within a few years, and then I worked on StarTrek.com, and then that went away with they shut that down.
Yeah, it seemed like they kind of wanted to wash their hands after Enterprise, right? They wanted to start new.
Well, it wasn't really. The perception was, now this was like 3 or 4 years into the fan film boom. So yeah, James Cawley's the original ones. We were, YouTube was so slow. You had dial-ups, and it'd take 30 minutes to download an act.
Yeah, I remember those days. Yes.
But things quickly accelerated to the point where that was a boomlet. And so there was this perception, there was a Hollywood perception. Oh, look at the ratings of Enterprise going down. Here's a dirty little secret. So, Enterprise was like Voyager, the flagship of UPN. Well, UPN was a crippled little network. They were only in 2/3 of the country's markets. And
right.
Even if it was, Enterprise was the top show on UPN, but they were still like in the 90s of all the shows on ratings, right? And one thing people would say, well, look, it's the most, in those days, the most TiVo'd show. It's the most DVR'd recorded show. And people are like, and money people were like, we don't care. We want them to watch the commercials. They're zooming through the commercials.
Yeah, well,
now we measure that. We measure replays within 3 days and 6. That's a just like the original series didn't look at demographics until after Star Trek. Star Trek was the perfect show for the right audience type instead of just the raw numbers of viewers. Well, too bad we canceled it last year. I mean, it was a lot the same with Enterprise, but the great secret about Enterprise was the 4th season, when it was on, this is your make or break year, guys. They gave you an extra year. It was actually the 3rd season was supposed to be the make or break year. That's where the whole Xindi ramped up 9/11 plot came from. And then the 4th season was bought out by the studio, who said, we'll put more money in if you let us have 100 shows. But that was the season that Ron Moore's Galactica reboot premiered and was the darling of everybody, right, on Sci-Fi.
Right.
It got all the attention. And meanwhile, it was like Enterprise was doing awesome things, and a lot of people say the best year, but it was like limping to the finish line, where Galactica was just exploding out of the gate and getting all the praise and the fan praise and the critic praise and all that. And the thing was, Sci-Fi was still a cable channel. And what somebody pointed out to me a few years ago was, even with that perception, Enterprise was being seen by 1 million more people every week than Galactica. Its audience was bigger.
And they weren't looking at that at the time.
Yeah, well, no, the perception was, it was basically you had big fish in small pond, small fish in big pond syndrome.
Right.
And so the perception was that Enterprise was just fading. It's sad. It's pathetic. To the outsiders, those of us watching loved it, but and the perception was that Galactica was just. Now we love Galactica. We love Ron and Galactica. We love them both. It shouldn't be a choice. But the fact was, the perception did not match the reality. And Enterprise still had 1 million more people watching every week than Galactica did. So,
yeah, I think they never really gave Enterprise a chance. I've been re-binge watching the whole thing again, and definitely some great writing and some great episodes in there. And to go back a little bit to Voyager, they kind of seemed to throw them to the wolves at the end because they were all ramped up to get into Enterprise. But I cannot even imagine the stress of starting Voyager that Kate Mulgrew had to go through. All these people on the set watching her every move every day. That had to be just excruciating. And she was spot on, man, from word go.
Well, look, she had the weight of the Star Trek franchise on her shoulders, and then she had the weight of this new network on her shoulders. I mean, in effect. And that's why big wigs from the studio. Now, of course, UPN and WB, came out of the gate at the same time as the new 4th network, but very quickly it was clear that UPN was going to be the 5th. Their best shows, they instantly wanted to match the big 3, and they weren't, but they had some good shows. 7 Days, and there was a time travel. They had some. The sitcoms weren't so great, but the drama shows weren't bad, but they kept canceling them because they weren't NBC, ABC, CBS quality, and they gradually kind of spiraled down in quality aside from the Star Treks. And then they brought the wrestling in and all that. But it was just, and they would turn over. They had little wannabe network executives every couple of years turned over until what's his name from CBS took over. That was later Me Too'd out of his job.
Oh yeah.
But who didn't like Star Trek or didn't like? I think he liked. The perception was that he didn't like science fiction, but the bottom line was he didn't like things that didn't make money. And suddenly Star Trek had always been the golden calf of Star Trek, of UPN.
Right.
The golden child. And suddenly it was like, nope, you got to make your numbers just like everybody else.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I just like I was saying, I think they all did a fantastic job on Voyager. You know, like I said, Kate out of the gate just crushed it. You know, she was just in charge. You were totally believable. Great, great production value. I thought it was amazing, and I just didn't think they gave Enterprise enough time to kind of get its legs.
no,
Really, they wanted it like that. And I've heard all the actors say they had to be spot on, word for word, every scene. There was no room for deviation or for them to maybe do a little ad lib. It was very.
well, that was just the way the way Rick ran his shows. That was that way. I mean, they had to call if they wanted to change one word. Even Patrick, toward the end of Next Gen, you would think had the clout to. They still had to call the office and ask if it was okay to change this one word or this one thing.
Yeah, it's a little crazy. So all that archival footage and everything kind of put you together with Trek Files and Trekland.
Yeah. Yeah, so that time in between before I found an entrepreneur coach that said, oh yes, you can invent something. And that's where, you didn't mention Portal 47, but that was really my first time to harness, because I love the actors, but I love the behind the scenes, the making of, the way that comes through in the companion, right? In the Next Gen companion. And a lot of the writing and the projects that I did after that for the fact files out of UK, a lot of which wound up in the coffee table Star Trek books and things that came over here. But I didn't want to give that up, and I knew that those people had stories. They weren't being interviewed, they weren't convention guests, and I didn't want all that to leave. And I had started, I had a lot of it archived, but even then, and we were in a breathing gap there where there was no new Star Trek being made, and so I just want to get these people out to folks, and also find a way. In a licensed franchise, you can't just sit down and do a Star Trek book or do something, or use images. You've got to be licensed. And the companion was, and stellar cartography is too, but as a day-to-day operation in a franchise that's now diminished and on life support, aside for the love from the legacy shows, what did that look like? And so Portal 47 was how I came up with a way to get the backstage people out and also harness my memory of being front row and a lot of my own archives. And this was, I don't want to say early days of the internet, it was 2017 or 2015. This is my 10th anniversary year for Portal this fall. And having people subscribe, and before we had Patreon really, and before a lot of the things we have now, the system set up, I kind of pioneered this. So I've been every month having backstage guests of all stripe. I mean, there's that's just like a fraction back there. And then we got and I announced this, and then that fall they announced some new Trek was coming on a new thing from CBS streaming. And so almost immediately the world turned, but it didn't really, because CBS All Access and then Paramount, they were zealously guarding a lot of those folks and the ideas and secrets. So it wasn't as easy as sitting down at the end of the year and talking to 30 or 40 of the backstage folks like the old days.
Right.
For one thing, a lot of them were in Toronto, and some were here, but they were all under hinky NDAs, and it wasn't quite as cozy. But eventually, as the shows dropped off into the mix of all the legacy shows, the Berman era, and I even had some original series folks on too, but finding them, but getting a lot of that recorded, and now it's been 10 years of videoing, and we have slideshows and all. So I say Portal 47 is for all the Trek fans who have no idea how much Star Trek they still don't know. And that's been a blessing. And then after that, then within a couple of years, my entrepreneur circle said, everybody get it. We're talking about layers of history now. It's almost like the strata. And they said, things are going live. You got to get on and be live. And I said, how? What? Just get on Facebook and be on live. And so that's where Trekland Tuesdays Live, my Tuesday afternoon show, started.
Right, which I really enjoy, yeah.
Yeah, just with my iPhone turned around and going right there, and then doing the chat doing the chat on screen of my phone, and that was before the pandemic. And then a year later, Rod Roddenberry came to me and John Champion and said they'd been doing Mission Log for a while, the original podcast, going through the messages, meanings, and morals of every show, starting with The Cage through every series. And they said there's so much that Gene did not donate to the UCLA library, that we have letters and memos and scripts, but so much material that's not out to the public yet. How about we do a podcast and every week we spotlight a document? And I said, okay, let's do that as long as we have. And they said with a guest, and I said, okay, but I want the guests to be, related to the document, but I want them to be professionals.
Right.
Because one thing, and I'll take a breath. Sorry. One thing is, whatever I do, I mean, it goes back to when I was a fan, and I would read a lot of the zines, and I understood that people were so passionate about Star Trek, and they wanted to. Some people wrote fiction, and some people wanted to do cosplay and do costuming, and some people wanted to build models, real or CG, whatever, build props. And my thing was, I wanted to add to the background, just the archive of Star Trek. And also, but I'm a huge canonista. I got into, like you said, the star charting and also the chronology and all that, building all that out and realizing things that the creators didn't give us the first couple of generations. Now they do. They're smart. But that was my thing. But it was like how to do that, how to preserve that. So this is all part of my, interviewing people and keeping that archive going. Getting to do the book was something. And that's just part of me. My philosophy is that everyone's always going to love the actors, pay attention to them, and interview them. They'll be guests forever. They'll be interviewed forever. But these folks that work backstage, not so much. So the Trek Files fit right into me saying, let's not just have more fans talking about fandom to other fans, which is what I said. This is wonderful. I know that's what everybody in their passion wants to do. But I've got an access here point that we can build on the way I've done with Portal. I want guests from the franchise or family members of people who have passed and that kind of thing. So one thing I love about the Trek Files is I always take pains to have, real, or people from a certain, if Gene loved the future of police and, criminal law, then we have a real world lawyer who hopefully is also a Trek nerd. And
it kind of fits right into there, yeah.
So my overall, whatever I'm doing, my overall philosophy is I try not to do more of the same old. I try to find a new thing to add and not just add to the pile that's out there.
Right. Yep.
But that's great because we need everything preserved. So everybody, I'm not telling anybody not to do what they love doing. I'm just saying for me, I got to feel like I'm adding something that's hasn't been touched yet or hasn't been recorded yet.
Yeah. We're trying to touch on all the kind of different aspects. So we talk to people like yourself that have all the knowledge and have done all these different things, in the Trek universe. People that are writers, people that are actors, behind the scenes, I think is huge. That's why I really like your Trek Files. Those people don't see enough credit for all the creative things that they do behind the scenes. You see their name on the screen for 2 seconds. You don't have any idea who these people were, but they've probably written 3 or 4 books or come up with so many different things that we see all the time.
Well, and it's been a blessing that we've had everybody from that we just caught, people from Dorothy Fontana, Richard Arnold, some more that have passed, but also, I'm sorry, I've got fire alert thing going here.
Oh my gosh, are you all right?
No, it's just an app that pings in whenever there's updates to anybody.
Oh, okay. Just want to make sure you're okay where you're at.
It's a great app called Watch Duty, and they should be national if anybody else, when it gets to tornado and hurricane season elsewhere. No, it's been everybody from the greats and then some that have passed, so I'm glad we had time with them. To folks who were like early day fan leaders, like in the zine movement. We've had some things that refer back to Gene and Paramount dealing with, the awkwardness, just as it's always been. The whole legal thing versus fan passion, it came up with the fan films, right? And,
right. There's been tons and tons of fan films. You were in some of those, and I loved your Communicator magazine back in the day. Got that all the time. You've been to tons of the conventions, and you're doing the Star Trek Cruise 8. You're going to be on that also.
I am thrilled after these years. Yeah, I've finally had them see reason. No.
You weren't there for the last couple of years. Why not?
A lot of people's help speaking up for me. I'm really excited, and I've got to help do some marketing ahead of time with them and writes, and going to be writing some trivia for other people, for some of the actors, and doing my own presentations and no, it's just because it's like it's the convention on the boat, so it's like it's exactly the same except totally different. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, definitely one of the things that's on my bucket list to check out and do for sure. And not only that, you do the Trekland tours in Los Angeles. Hopefully, eventually, when things come back to some type of normalcy out there at some point.
Yes. I have a friend, Terrace Cassidy, that came to me 10 years ago about doing a big tour, which we've done with his Geek Nation Tours company 3 or 4 times. And we have it on the books. We haven't done it since 2016, but we have like a week long in LA. And then for the 50th anniversary, we added a few days in San Francisco because there's a lot to do. Because there's the fictional, and then there's the real. You can go to Vasquez Rocks, or Starfleet Academy, the Tillman Water Plant.
Right.
Or you can go to, especially in San Francisco, or you can go to all the sites from Star Trek 4 or from the Bell. But the Bell Riots was all filmed in LA on the lot, but they mentioned things all over San Francisco. So anyway, it's a fun mix you can do. And we did those. And along the way, and about the time I started Portal 47, I was like, there's got to be something else here that I can legally do within the bounds of Trek that can be my own. And I have all the research. I have call sheets and research for, sure, the obvious ones like Vasquez Rocks, but a lot of the obscure locations. And now everything's shot in Toronto, but Picard was shot here. So now I'm working on having those nailed down too. But there's over 50 places, big and small, you can check out in LA. And the cool thing, a lot of people run up to they find out about Vasquez Rocks. It's famous on its own. You can go up there and take your pictures and climb on the rocks and do all kinds of things. But there's really like 6 or 8 episodes filmed there besides the Gorn fight. And what I try to offer people is, aside from picking you up at your hotel and taking you back, 6 hours with 4 stops. The Trekland Trek structure that I developed, the basic template is 4 stops and a fast food lunch, me taking you, but ahead of time, you tell me what you want. What show is your favorite? What sites do you want to see? I work it out with you, and then I also guide you as, is it a weekday? Is it a weekend? What's the traffic? What's the situation? And then lead you through. And then I also wrangle if people they want to take their Starfleet uniforms photo at Starfleet Academy or Command.
Right, of course they want to do that, right?
Yep. Or they have wacky things like they have a stuffed animal that's in all their pictures, or they have action figures that they do pictures, and that's their thing they do on Vegas. I've had all kinds of requests, and whatever it is, we do pictures, whatever people want, and that's a day. And I've had some people do 2 different days back to back, different sites. And we even that includes going to the Paramount lot. The Paramount lot has tours. And they do some Star Trek things, but if you want the deep dive, we'll do that. But that I usually take 2 or 3 hours there, and that upsets the normal template. But that's fine. But the point is, we work it all out at a time. We don't have any surprises. People don't get surprised in traffic, or this is closed on Sunday, or whatever, or it's temporarily closed. I didn't know that. And and yes, I got that launched. Then we had pandemic. Then I was looking forward to the comeback, and then the pandemic kind of lingered, and then and then we got going last year, and now we've got the fires. But thankfully, Will Rogers has a place in Star Trek location history because that's really where they filmed the cloaked bird of prey from Star Trek 4.
Oh, okay.
And it's on the polo field at Will Rogers, and you can even line it when her blue pickup pulls up and lets them out with the white fencing behind it. I can even there's the gate and there's the thing they came up and did it. And
you can't put the indentation in the grass though, right?
yeah. I thought about that. I thought we should get a big 4x8 sheet of plywood and go out and press
make the indentation, right?
Now the Polo Club might yell at us for that.
Right.
Now, sadly, again, we lost the house and the ranch, the stables. And that's all the future's to be decided on that. But if you just want to come and recreate, once the park is open, you can still angle up and see where the bird of prey landed and have your, do your Gillian Taylor, where's the cloak ship mime routine.
Right. Awesome.
You can still that. But yes, we're waiting for the air to clear. But we really have pretty much everything that's on the original list is still very much around us.
Excellent. So, and all your stuff, obviously, you can go to LarryNemecek.com. And for all your podcasts and shows, you're on all the streaming services, or where can they check out Trek Files and Trekland?
Yeah, the Trek File. Well, we did a big project with Memory Alpha, you may have heard of, for the Trek Files, where now we have the TrekFiles.com takes you to the Trek Files page at Memory Alpha, but it's now not just an entry. It's archived. Before we were using Facebook, and it's still on Facebook, and please go like us, but it's hard. We didn't have a real good, we had 12 seasons. We're about to start season 13, and each season is 24 shows. They're short, but that's a lot. And now with Memory Alpha, you can easily archive and database and scroll back and forth, and the documents are all there, and there's an audio player. And then, of course, the hot links are right there into Memory Alpha. So the guest, the topic, anything is all right there in one place. And you can easily scroll back and forth on the prior seasons and keep up with the new ones. So that's cool. But it's at all the pod. If you just want the audio, that's the thing about Trek Files. I say it's the only podcast with homework, with paperwork.
Right.
Because we have the document with it, too. And so a lot of times there's a lot there. Sometimes it's 18, 20 pages. But... that's the cool thing about the Memory Alpha now. But it's all wherever you get your audio, you can do that there. Yeah.
Excellent. So you guys can check that out there. Check out Larry Nemecek, Trek Files, Trekland, LarryNemecek.com. And we hope to hear from you. I'm sorry.
When there's fresh Trek, the last couple of years I started to show a quick, a 2 days later review show called Second Opinion with Dr. Trek. And I'm about to do the Section 31, but people can do my YouTube channel that I got started with late, because YouTube used to be the server for your blog videos.
You're right.
But now it's its own thing. So I need everybody to go. I got into it late, but go like and subscribe on my YouTube channel. But that's where Trekland Tuesdays Live is archived. That's where, not the Trek Files, but everything else is there. Second Opinion is my review show 2 days later, 3 days later. And also, I love this, when Prodigy started, Cadet Alice and Dr. Trek watch Prodigy. And it's a little 20, 30-minute show where we watched every episode of Prodigy and talked about it.
Yeah, I saw some of that as well.
5,
yep.
6, 7, 8-year-old granddaughter.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's great. That's awesome.
That's all at my YouTube, too, that you can get to.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, very cool. Well, we're definitely interested in your second opinion on Section 31. A lot of debate on that, going back and forth. I guess we'll wait and see what happens with that, and how the fandom takes that. I guess we'll have to wait. Yep, but definitely. So that wraps up this episode of Talking About Trek. Thank you to my guest today, Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek, obviously. Thank you to our sponsors, the Federation, the International Federation of Trekkers. We hope you'll join us on our next episode. Till then, we'll see you out there.
Thanks, Robert. Trek well, everybody.
Thank you, Larry.